Hello there, welcome to the Being Fine Facebook group and the live videos that we are running every Wednesday at 7 p.m. GMT. I'm Baldwin, Trott, the editor of the book Being Fine, and I'm the publisher too, the publishing company of Proper Books, which is my company. The book Being Fine, the other F word, is very much has a focus of men's mental health, men's communication, men's energy, to be put on a vague front. But we have been, I've been very blessed to have two authors, and actually the foreword of this book is written by a woman. But one of the female authors is joining me tonight, and I'm very thrilled to introduce you to Laurelle Rond. Hi, Laurelle.
Hello, nice to be here.
Oh, thanks for coming along on the very first of the Being Fines of 2021. So the book will be out by the end of the month. I'm absolutely determined that it will be out by the end of the month. But thank you very much, Laurelle, for coming tonight, and also for joining this really important conversation, which is aimed at men. But there are a few of us women, and obviously me included, that have a fair bit to say and a huge amount of support for men and why they don't speak up. So yeah, what I'd like to do to start with is talk about your work, because your background and your fields and where you come from has very much lends itself. And I know you've worked with men and women in the past. But tell us about your history, Laurelle, and what led you to write for this brilliant book.
I've been very interested in the way the mind works, and having worked quite a lot with history, looking at how patterns repeat themselves in lives. I've gone down the psychological route, but also the route of what would it be like if we had past lives, and if we repeated patterns from those lives. Now, I'm completely convinced that that is the case, but one doesn't have to believe that that's the case. It's a good model, it's a good coat hanger to hang various ideas off. And these have led me to looking at mythology and archetypes. And there's an absolutely brilliant Celtic story of Parsifal, who's one of the knights, or becomes one of the knights of King Arthur's Round Table, as to how a man is supposed to become a man. And he does what none of us want to do. He fails and he fails and he fails. He eventually gets there. But this understanding that failure is part of the process is something we all really need to take on board, whatever gender we are. We somehow have created a culture where we think it's about success and about straight A's at school, and everyone getting a first-class degree. And it's terrifying. It stops us from looking inside ourselves in a real way. It stops us from becoming vulnerable. And this, I believe, is a huge problem for both genders, but in particular for men. It's as though if a man becomes vulnerable, he cannot become a real man. And yet, unless a man becomes vulnerable, he cannot become a real man. So there's this horrible dichotomy there, which I think is tearing men apart. It's stopping that they no longer have a role that's predictable. It's a bit like COVID and all of us at the moment. Life is no longer predictable. We have no idea what's going to happen in the future. Actually, the past is now irrelevant. All we've got is the present moment, which on one level is brilliant. We're all being brought into the present moment. But unless we embrace things like vulnerability, that becomes excruciatingly painful. And this is causing huge issues with mental health.
Absolutely. And the fascinating thing when I received your chapter was that you had kind of encompassed a point of relevance that was raised in every single chapter by every man that had submitted theirs already. Because you actually were one of the last people to come on board with the project. But it was wonderful because you were giving a very different perspective of this key word, vulnerability, and also the element of social conditioning that virtually every single author, male author of this book has touched on, and not only touched on, this is what's driven them to go down, sadly, a very, very terrible slippery slope into unwellness and mental health issues. So for me there seems two elements to what you're saying. And firstly, it's social conditioning, which I think the male authors cover brilliantly in this book, and they talk about their own stories of how they have felt so pressurized to be, like you say, not just earning the money, but actually achieving and more achievement and more achievement. There's always something bigger and shinier to achieve and get. And then also there's this element of what are we as humans, and how have men evolved? And that's the one I'd like us to focus on tonight, because you and I have done work. I've worked with you personally. You've been my client, and I've been your client actually over the years. And archetypes and the mythology and the power of those wonderful stories which come through our ancestry, they have such relevance, don't they? But that sadly. So what is happening for men, with their roles? What do you believe has gone wrong, and where do we need to go? What do we need to change to help come out of it?
I don't think anything's gone wrong. I just think this is the experiment that is humanity. We've put this extraordinary species that we are into a melting pot, and we see what happens. And now we're at a stage. There's a lot of historical evidence that for a very long time, in the beginning with the Stone Age, which went on for millions of years, that we lived generally under a matriarchy. And because it wasn't realized that men had anything to do with procreation, men served the women, and the women created, and they were worshipped as the creators. And then men started to get fed up, just as women have got fed up by repression. And they didn't want to be told what to do by women any longer. And when they discovered that, in fact, they were 50% of the creation process, they took that physical strength and they decided they were going to be the boss. That's actually happened for a fairly short time, probably 6,000 years. So a much, much shorter time than matriarchy. But now the point, I believe, of this human experiment is that we balance up. And the divine feminine, as we call it, went into hiding during patriarchy. Now the divine feminine's come back. And it's not that we're going to go back into matriarchy. It's that the divine masculine and feminine are now ready to marry each other and be equal. And that is true in all of us as well. So we as women, we have a default to the divine feminine. But in order to become whole, we need to find our masculine. And a man has a default towards his masculine, but in order to become whole, he has to find his divine feminine. And if you look archetypally at this, it's very interesting, because each archetype has light qualities and shadow qualities. This doesn't mean good and bad. The light qualities are the ones that we can own, that we can we can say we have, we can work with. The shadow ones are the ones that we really don't want to know about. And a lot of our work in finding our wholeness is in accepting and integrating the shadow. So the shadow of, well, the light qualities of the male are very recognizable qualities. So courage, strength, vitality, decisiveness, focus, that kind of thing. Whereas the shadow of the male, if the coin flips into darkness, then the divine masculine can become aggressive and ruthless and argumentative and mechanistic. And all of us, irrespective of gender, have both light and shadow. So as a woman, we equally have to integrate both. So for a man, he needs, in order to find his wholeness, he needs to find the light and the shadow of the female. So the female light things are emotions, which is what this book is all about. Feelings, tenderness, relatedness, love, compassion, creativity, all wonderful things, but they demand a certain vulnerability. But the shadow, and we can all go into this, are moodiness, sentimentality, hysteria, possessiveness, withdrawal. Now that's an interesting one. That withdrawal is in the shadow feminine, because a lot of men appear to withdraw, but that's actually something about the female that they're learning. So it is fascinating. We don't want to be too analytical about it, because we're all made up of various proportions of gender, and gender that we don't consider to be gender in the same way anymore. So to say that it's black and white, again, is a light shadow thing. But generally, in order, whatever sex we are, in order to find ourselves, we need to look inside. And again, generally, the masculine is the outer world and the feminine is the inner world. Cultural conditioning tells us to live in the outer world, and it moves away from the internal. But it's very important to find your divine female, that you go inside, and that's what the Parsifal story is all about.
So women's roles have evolved like men's roles have, and it sounds like that we as women, many women have become very evolved, very much in the outer world, and so very much so task focused, very decision making, very always sort of steering the ship instead of being present in it. And divine feminine, if I'd had a pound, I'd heard that every time I heard that word this week. So the divine is coming up, the divine feminine, divine masculine. But divine feminine seems to be a part of the picture, because that there are definitely elements in all of us that need, like you say, it's about being whole, isn't it? And sadly, men and women have gone instead of being whole, we've gone too far down separate paths, and actually neither of which serve us. But also, and the thing I'd like to come on to is that really confuses the relationships. Because actually in virtually every single chapter in this book from the male authors, at some point there's a relationship problem or challenge rather, because the male doesn't fit, the men haven't felt they can open up and share, and that's got two parts to it themselves, because of how he feels, but also how he feels his relationship and how the partner is in his life is. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think relationships are probably the hardest thing we ever have to negotiate. They're also probably the strongest learning ground that we have to find ourselves, because we are faced with our opposite. And in shadow stuff, all the stuff we don't acknowledge, we project onto that person, who then becomes a mirror for all that we don't want to face. So it's not surprising that relationships end up being battlegrounds and power battles. If only we could learn how to open up to each other. I personally think that the two words to consider with this are being and doing, and it's another marriage. So this is, again, a big picture thing, that the divine female is about being and the divine male is about doing. We need both, but energy first comes into being. Once it's into being, it then wants to do something. In order to be in the world, we need to have action. That's the masculine. But first we've got to be. And for that, we need the female. So there's also there's a journey that goes on here. And it's not, culturally, we've arrived at the doing bit and we've taken out the being bit. Well, you can't do that. It's like cutting off your legs. And therefore, we arrive in a relationship, probably with lots of lovely biological attraction stuff. But once that works its way through, the foundation isn't there, the foundation of being. So therefore, neither sex wants to be vulnerable, and neither wants to open up, because they're too busy trying to be cleverer than the other person.
So it's about kind of keeping like the one-upmanship then. Sorry, that's got the word man in, but I can't think of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I absolutely think it is. And if you look at relationships over many, many years, there generally is a power struggle in the middle. Now, that power struggle can then teach two people, if they keep on at it and working and putting in energy and time, to showing them what real love is. So the in love turns to love, but generally there's power there. And then you realize you've got the great S word, surrender. You realize that you actually cannot hold this power battle any longer, and you just have to give in. And at that point of giving in, then you become vulnerable, then you can open up. And if you have a relationship which can handle that, and you both do that at the same time, it can be beautiful.
Okay, so it's like a contract for both of you then to just agree that you are going to be vulnerable with each other. Is it that simple?
Well, is it that simple? You have to be allowed to cry. You have to be allowed to be everything that you are, and everything that you are is not wonderful. We've all got our grotty bits. We say warts and all, love me warts and all, with a colossal dose of humor and acceptance and all these qualities which we hope we will learn: honesty, compassion, love, all of this stuff. Those are the transformers that turn being in love into real love and ultimately unconditional love. I love you, whatever you do, whoever you are, I love you. End of. I am love. It's a state of being, and we go back to the being. Love is not something you do, it's something that you are. So you've got a beautiful marriage there.
Yeah. So, but you've got to love from within first before you can obviously love.
And it's, you got to love yourself first. I mean, this is a hackneyed thing about loving yourself first, but it's true. If you do not love yourself and you do not integrate all this stuff in yourself, how do you even know what love looks like? How do you embrace it and be that love? Because you're not always going to like that person. Of course you're not, but you can always love them if you love yourself.
Yeah. So it's accepting us for all that we are. So that conditioning that you can't be this, you can't be that, you can't cry, and that's happened to women as much as men, but more men. But, so all of that, we're failing. You know, we're feeling emotional. Oh, you're failing. We feel like crying. Oh, you're failing. So this terrible degradation of our humanness, you know, a depletion almost, isn't it? It's tragic.
I mean, there is expansion and there is contraction, and that's it. So what happens with many of us and in and out of relationships is that we contract. We try to become small enough to be acceptable in whatever, whether it's by society or by our relationship or our work, whatever it is. We do this. Instead of which, if we expand, then the beautiful things happen. But we come back again to what we talked about at the beginning, this word failure. Yeah, we fail, and we get up and we try again. And each time we try again, we find a little bit more. And it's like practice. You practice the piano, you practice meditation, you practice athletics. You're not suddenly born with this ability. You do it, you repeat it again and again and again and again. You learn a language. We practice for years to be able to speak eloquently. We don't come into the world able to do it. And practice means failure. We need to embrace failure. And unfortunately, society has said to men that masculinity and failure cannot exist in the same sentence. We have to quash that. The whole Parsifal story is about failure. He's laughed at, he's humiliated, he's degraded. There's just, bless him, he has a dreadful time. But he gets there in the end because he keeps on trying. And as he tries, he learns and he understands eventually what he has to do.
And that's very much about love, isn't it? The Parsifal story. I'm just going to have to take 1 second off camera, so I'm just going to disappear. But can we just talk about love and relationships and where you feel, because you have been working in therapy for years and years, and you've worked a lot on relationship. So can you just cover what that means to you? Just 1 second, I need to disappear on camera. My delightful little dog has a very loud bark, even though she's the size of a kitten. But if you could explain that, because I think that's amazing.
Yes. So to relate to somebody requires being with them, and this can be with your children, it can be with your spouse, it can be with a friend, it can be with nature. And the perfect example of relationship now is our relationship with the earth. We have raped her. We have abused her. All of these things is what we have done to each other, and the earth is showing us what we have done to each other. And it feels as though we don't have the time to put things right so that the earth can continue to support us. But actually, it's really simple and it's really fast. If we all came into right relationship with each other and ourselves, the relationship with the earth would change overnight. We would no longer abuse animals, resources, trees, nature. We wouldn't want to do it because we would be in a state of being that honored everything, that respected everything, that honored and respected everyone, that honored and respected ourselves, whether we are male or female. And when we do that, then our relationship with the earth will change, and the earth herself will change. And I actually think that COVID is about this as well, but that's a whole other story.
Well, let's try not to get banned from Facebook, maybe. But
sorry, that's the C word.
But no, you're fine. I'm saying it tongue in cheek, but yeah, because it makes sense. If we're not respecting ourselves and nurturing who we are, then you know we are just destroying the planet at a phenomenal rate. The planet's always evolved, but the destruction rate at the moment is it's unprecedented, and so it suddenly, you know, the way you put it just makes so much sense that we must start looking after each other, but also the planet, because it's only reflecting, isn't it, how we're looking at our own bodies. Because we're not looking after our bodies properly. We're eating the wrong foods, filling them with, you know, and filling them with chemicals, not looking after our environments, filling our houses with radiation, etc., etc. It's all part and parcel of it, isn't it, I suppose?
If we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, then we have to ask, what do I need to strengthen? And all of those things are very obvious. We need clean food, we need a clean mind, we need a clean heart, we need fresh air and exercise. Frankly, we don't need an awful lot more than that. We don't need all this stuff. It just gets in the way. Yeah. And there are days when we feel vulnerable. We have to allow that to happen. But always asking ourselves, what do we need, and what do other people need? So yeah, there we go. I think transformation is happening, and I absolutely believe wholeheartedly that we will transform and are transforming. But like childbirth, it's painful.
It sure is.
Yep.
Oh, and it does, you know, let's round it off before we finish. You know, it does come back to being vulnerable and allowing our vulnerability to shine. I mean, I personally have just started really sharing about how I suffer SAD. You know, and I've suffered that for years. I've been poo-hooed. People have said, "Oh, I don't believe that's such a thing." But you know, it's realizing that it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It's how you feel and believe. That's all that matters, isn't it? And sharing that, and with our loved ones, because you know, I think this is a difficult time for so many. It's a difficult time for many who suffer from anything to do with seasonal affective disorder. In the northern hemisphere anyway, and you know, and it's certain parts of where the climate is so dark this time of year. So it's really important we start being honest with ourselves and admitting, and that is actually what the book is just about, really, very simply, isn't it?
And in being in such a dark time, this is the internal time. It's the introspection time. In the summer, we're out, we're active, we're doing. In the winter, we withdraw, we come into ourselves, we sit and we talk to people, and we admit that, you know, life isn't always easy, and we cry on each other's shoulders, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, just holding the space, isn't it, and allowing it to come forward, and not closing it down, and allowing it to manifest physically, because part of your work in the past has been healing with sound, and you know, everything manifests in some way. It doesn't disappear because there's nowhere to disappear to. Energy is everything, even though we can't see it. So this is the sort of, you know, the tragedy is that there are so many ailments, aren't there, that could be reflective of exactly what you're saying. Well, you and I both believe in this, so I would say are reflective of the fact that we're not allowing our humanness to come through, and our vulnerability.
Yeah.
You know, especially, you know, and how that manifests in the body through certain parts of the body.
You can look at what the body is. Our bodies are our best friends, and we ignore them until they go wrong. They're not going wrong. They're telling us what we need to look at. And if you start to read the body and understand the language of the body, then actually miracles are very, very possible.
Absolutely. We don't know what we're capable of, do we?
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Laurelle. I'm just going to mention, just because I can, because this is sort of slightly my gig as well as yours, but obviously you are one of the incredible therapists and experts on an International Immunity Month, which is also running this month in January. So if you are interested in immunity, which is at the core of our health, then flip over to that after this, and join the Facebook page, International Immunity Month, where you can hear more from Laurelle. I will be posting some information from her as well in there. But Laurelle, just one final, what would be your support with your sort of previous therapist head on, and with your, what would you say to men who are listening to this, and women obviously, but people are listening to this and recognizing that they're not necessarily being as vulnerable as they can? What would you say to them? What would you offer as your best kind of guidance for them?
I would say first and foremost, listen. As you say, that word is magical. We are terribly forward in giving opinions and making judgments. Just detach, sit back and listen. And that detachment will help you to balance out a little bit. And once you have listened, allow yourself to listen to yourself, because you will tell yourself what you need. And then you find one person, maybe two, but no more than that, that you trust, and you talk to them. Do not talk to loads and loads of people. That just dissipates energy. But find one or two people you can talk to, and allow yourself to make mistakes while you talk. Allow yourself to work out how you feel while you talk.
Yeah, because verbalizing it isn't easy, is it? It really isn't.
It's very hard.
Thank you very much, Laurelle. It's been fantastic talking to you. And obviously, if you are really struggling and you do feel like you don't have that one person or those two people, then please go to www.myblackdog.co. My Black Dog, we are supporting them. They are supporting us, because they're an incredible charity who offer online peer-to-peer support. And obviously, if you really are struggling, then contact the Samaritans, 116-123. They will be there for you 24/7 on the end of the phone. So Laurelle Rond, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It has been absolutely awesome, as it always is, speaking to you. I wish you a lovely evening.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you for watching, everyone. This is Jo Baldwin Trott, the Being Fine Facebook group. Please join us there. You will not only hear about the next live next Wednesday, but also when the book is coming out. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care, and have a relaxing, light some candles, and reach out to some friends if you feel like you need some help. Take care, everyone. Good night. Bye. Bye.
Bye.